Hello and welcome to the Bad Dice Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be doing the initial review of the Lumineth Realm-Lords from the Playtesters' point of view. So I'm joined with some of the guys from the playtesting team who have played games with the book already and have been planning lists for a while and hopefully should have hands-on experience of how these guys look on a table. We've seen all the information from the community team over the last few weeks, showing teasers and spoilers, and there's not many people out there who have actually got lists on the table, experience under the belts with games with the new Realm Lords. So I'm hoping for an interesting show, some really good ideas, and some good insights into how these things actually play out. So welcome to the show, guys. We have Brian Carmichael, Chippy Rick, Paul Buckler and James Tinsdale, and we might be joined by Jack Armstrong if he can be available tonight as well. So how are you all? How's lockdown treating everyone? And hopefully you're all doing well.
Yeah, all good.
Everyone's waiting for everyone to speak. This is where the host should direct the questions. So I've already been pre-show chat with Brian and Paul. So let's start with Brian. How are you getting on, mate?
Yeah, good.
Excited for these guys? You most recently on Slanesh, weren't you? Are these going to see you switching over?
Yeah, definitely. Really excited for them. Just think they kind of go back to kind of almost 5th, 6th edition Warhammer way of playing. So they bring something really different to the table. Yeah,
definitely. I agree. And Jim, so you never played a fantasy battle, did you? So you've not got that high elf nostalgia that these guys are feeling, but you're still excited for the list. You like Teclis.
Yeah, well, I'm an interesting perspective because I love the army being new to it, but there's so many throwbacks like Altharian, for instance, that previous fans of fantasy know. So it's really cool to see both fan bases come together for the same army. But I'm super psyched for the army, and as a Deepkin player, I've always been intrigued to finally see a Teclis model.
Yeah, definitely. So, Rick, you're I don't know, you can play a bit of everything over the years. So how are you finding these guys? Are you excited?
Yeah, definitely. Similar to Jim, actually, I've had a fair bit with the Deepkin, especially more at club rather than events. So playing some of the elves in Age of Sigmar has been good already. I like where they're very different for me, especially the aspects that we'll talk about in a bit. It's completely different to what I played with the Deepkin so far.
Yeah, magic for a start. There's not much of that with Deepkin, is there? There's a little bit, I suppose. And so, Paul, you were on the last show with the Seraphon, and as we covered there, you've got all the armies, so you'll definitely be having these. What is there anything that particularly takes your fancy?
I think the cavalry, for me, just looking at the models, they just really sort of bring me back to like the old high elf cavalry of old. They really sort of show that classic elegance, maybe, of high elves. So moving forwards, they bring that sort of into the realm of Age of Sigmar and forward with a Realm Lord version.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they've done a real good job of just keeping all the classic cool and still adding enough Age of Sigmar into it. Okay, so let's talk then. Let's start with the initial reactions. So you guys all the PDF landed all in your inboxes, and you dived in and started looking at the army. Obviously, Teclis is the big poster child of this book, and it's really magic-heavy faction. So what were the first reactions from diving into reading the PDF? Brian, what did you think from first off? What was immediately jumped out at you as being cool?
So I didn't like them when I first got the book. So when we were playtesting it, I played against them a lot. So Jack, initially when we started playing, Jack played with them and I played against them. But I kind of fell in love with them playing against them, which is quite an unusual thing, I think. I think they're a real players' army because they've got lots of. They're super fragile, but they've got lots of tricks, and that really appealed to me. And lots of kind of synergies between things. So that's where my deep love for them came from an initial kind of don't really get it. Some books you get and you're like, wow, that's cool. I can see that's cool and that's cool and that's cool. They jump out. I think you have to see these on the table for me to kind of really feel the love for them.
Yeah, I get that. So, I mean, it's a tricky one when you think it's just like a bunch of elves with spears, bows, and things like that, and a bit of magic. And it's hard to see where the power in the list comes from. I mean, we'll talk a bit later on our thoughts on the meta. But what about getting like your first list together? What about you, Jim? You've obviously been writing some lists and digging into the book. Where did you start? Did you just go straight in for Teclis, or did you try and write lists without him as well?
Well, I mean, Les, who's not here tonight, we were considering taking them at the time for ETC. So me and Les did a lot of lists with Tom as well. And yeah, Teclis is always the starting point because he embodies the strengths of the army with the casting and also the buff protection he can give out. So we start with him, and it's really how do you do it? Do you go for lots of bodies, objective style army? Do you go for an elite, more harder hitting style unit army? Because I think in this book you can actually, there's a lot of different variation with the tech you put around Teclis. So it's really what you want the army and how you want it to function.
So I don't know, we've said this tonight already. I was like, Teclis is so cheap. And then Paul was like, yeah, but he's so expensive. So I don't know. It's a weird points, isn't he?
He is, but I think when you look at contrasting models in the range, something like Alariel, for instance, is quite close to him, another Elven god, probably more squishy than Teclis, but it's hard. How much do you value magic? Because you lose the more his points go up, the more bodies you lose off the table. So it's a really fine line, I think, and we'll see how it goes. Interested to see how he gets on at his current point total. I think he's a great model with a really fair rule set. I think the Wolves team have done a great job with him. Bringing something unique to the game with him.
He feels a lot like Marathi. So when Marathi came in, it was like, what do you mean she can't die? But then now, everyone knows how to deal with most people. Maybe you don't.
Too soon.
Most people
Too soon.
know how to deal with Marathi. I think he's going to be kind of the same thing. It's like, what do you mean you can cast all the spells you want? And eventually it'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, we're playing Teclis. This is what we need to do. Okay, so right, what about you then, Paul? We've spoke off air about some different builds already. Now, have you gone straight in with the, into the big boy, get Teclis on the table, or have you been looking at the mountains and things?
No, Teclis is for me. As soon as I read it, I was like, I just want to use him. I don't think I've ever played a really magic-heavy army before. So I've never played Nagash, not really used a Lariel, never played Tzeentch. So for me, it was like, this is my chance to play an army that has magic at its heart, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it's its core mechanic. And I also like armies that are kind of jack of all trades. They have units that can deal with any situation. And I think Realm-Lords do that quite well. All of their units kind of spread out and have a set role and a set task they do. And you can use them for that role.
Yeah, I can see that. They are very sort of like classic in the fact that like you've got your bowmen, you've got your spearmen, you've got your horsemen. It's like there's not many of the the Stormcast hunters or some trying to do a bit of everything. You're very down the line. So Rick, we've already spoke to you again about what you've been building, but you're the one who's the fan of the mountains, aren't you?
Yeah, I think. As much as when the book came to us, it definitely echoes of High Elves of old. There's certain elements of this book that really hit me as, wow, that's like next steps on the story in Age of Sigmar. I think when the KO came out, for me, that was one of the first times I really saw what Age of Sigmar was. And I certainly feel like some of the mountains and the elite units in this had such a different aesthetic, a different feel, even into the rules themselves. It was like there's mountains in elf and armies. That to me, that was just cool. A very new, big approach.
No, I get that. Okay, so let's move on a bit and let's dig into some of the rules and how they fit in with the list. So I've made a bit of a cheat sheet of some of the things that the Lumineth bring to the table that when I find it, they bring some real new stuff to the game that we've not seen before. So the first big one's obviously Teclis. He's got his spell mechanic where he can choose one spell that can't be unbound, or he can choose 2 spells to cast on 12 automatically, or 4 spells to cast on 10s. But that's not the only unique mechanic that the Realm-Lords are bringing. They've got the lightning reflexes, where if you fight, you can pick another unit to fight again. They've also got some lesser, kind of more subtle new things, which is they've got a spell that makes your opponent spend 2 command points to use 1, which I think is just a really interesting new rule on an existing mechanic. It's just a new way of tweaking it. I like the look of that. And then you've got there's an ability to bounce back Battleshock tests. So I've picked these out as being the 4 major new mechanics in the book. Are you guys all trying to squeeze these into lists? Can you get all of these new mechanics into one list, or is it kind of picking some of them to use and not others? Obviously, the lightning reflex is army-wide, but the others you can work around them. Are the lists that you guys have played so far reliant on these new mechanics, or are these new mechanics just kind of a bonus? What do you think? Who wants to go first with this one?
I can if you want.
Sure.
So I think you can fit them all in. The list I'm favouring at the moment hasn't got the Calathar to do the Battleshock bouncing, simply because I need some mobility. So I've got the points for her, but I use a unit of Dawn Riders instead to give me mobility. But that's the cool thing about the book. I mean, you picked out 4 of the big ones. There's obviously Ether Quartz as well, which is a cool mechanic. But you can cram them all in, but then you kind of run out of bodies. It's that kind of, which of the tools do you think are most appropriate for your style of play, and then you build a list around that.
You guys all agree with that sort of thing, or is this something else?
I think Teclis is pretty key for several of those mechanics. If you put him in your list, you get a couple of those just by putting him in there. If you leave him out, you probably struggle to get them in there reliably.
Okay.
Things like the 2 command points. If Teclis isn't casting that, it's not guaranteed you're going to get it off.
Yeah, sure thing.
So I think he's if you want to utilise all of them, I think you probably have to run a Teclis list.
Yeah, I get that.
For me, when the first sort of round of testing, I played a fair bit against Paul, and similar as mentioned already, I was actually not using the army like Brian, and playing against that where it was a nice problem to have as an opponent, because rather than just having rules taken away from you, or we do hear a lot about the negative impact of certain debuffs and things. I wouldn't call it so much that. It's something that you is aware that could happen, and you've got to manage your command points to make sure you can still do what you do without them just being taken away. So it doesn't have that such a bad feel either.
Yeah, so it's
and I found that
can't use. It's you can use, but you've got to try a little harder.
Yes, yeah, it definitely didn't have that negative feel, which I know is something that as playtesters we're very conscious of looking at that doesn't happen.
Yeah, sure. I like that. There's the whole Cathalar absorbs the negative energy as well. Maybe the Cathalar can absorb some of that from Twitter. You know.
Good luck.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously all the books nowadays have what did we call them last time? Skyports, or these are called the great cities.
Great nations.
The great nations. Sorry. Are you guys picking these out first and building your list down the line, or are you kind of playing your lists and then swapping the same list between the nations? How much of an impact are the nations having on what you're seeing on the tabletop? Sorry, I did say right at the start, I said I'll direct questions at one of you guys to answer, and then I've not been doing it as we're going down. So, Jim, what about you?
For me, I've been looking at the battalions and trying to fit them into cities with great nations.
Okay.
And starting there. So the one I really like, obviously, with Alarith is the Alarith Temple formation. And that obviously fits, I'm sure I'm saying this wrong, but Eumetrica? Is that how we all say it?
Yep. Eumetrica.
For me, that's where you start. Is where you find a battalion you like, presumably with the units that you like, the rules. And then you find its best home, if you will, in the Great Nations. And usually there's a couple of variants they can go in. For me, obviously, I like to double down on the ignoring -2 rend and rerollable saves. So that's where I've started. But that's usually where I start. Battalions into the city cities or skyports or whichever formation to the tome, and then go from there really and flesh out your force that way. Because it gives it kind of a visual identity as well, I think. Because all the battalions are based on more.
Are you doing that because you think the battalions are strong, or because you like to play with battalions, or?
Because I'm coming at it from a match play perspective, so I'm looking for lower drops, more artifacts, more command points. So I think battalions really serve real purpose in that. Sometimes you don't always get one that aligns with the units that you want. So it depends, but there are others. There's other formations that I like as well, like the Auralian Legion I like. But I don't think that has a better city than your Metro it can be home in. But that's a good starting point. I think when you get so many options of great nations and battalions, it's a great way to marry two of them together and see where you land.
Yeah, I like that. It gives you a lot of flexibility. We talked about this a fair bit during the last review show, the Seraphon, with not only do you get the battalions that do different things in different sky hosts and star hosts and whatnot. They've got the Coalesce versus the Starborn, so there's a lot of interaction there. But yeah, you can see how this would work here too. Okay, so let's talk a bit about. So we've covered like the first thoughts on putting lists together and things like that. Let's dig a bit more into the details of like highlights of rules and how units work and. Anything that's really exciting in the book that you think that's a really good mechanic. I want to play around that. I want to see that used more in the game and take it from there. So the one that jumped out for me with the Sentinels, I've just said, well, we'll have 10 units of them, and then Brian and Paul have told me why that's a terrible idea because they'll just get run over. But I still like the idea of 10 units. But I think that's a cool way of It goes to show there's different ways of looking at everything. But so we'll talk about the Sentinels first. Brian, do you just want to cover what these guys do?
Yeah, so they're the archers of the Venari. So the Venari are basically the martial kind of foot troops of the Lumineth. So you have the Wardens with the spears, the Sentinels with the bows, and the Dawn Riders for the cavalry. So they're coming units of 10. They're 140 points. They have a champion who doesn't have a bow. He has a sword and a little lantern. That's a fairly... I think you see that in the Wardens as well. He hasn't got a pike. He's got a sword, so the champions are different. Also, the champion is a mage as long as there's 5 models in the unit. So, and that's, again, broadly true overall. And he's not limited like certain mage units are. The unit's got a spell. He can take spells from the lore. He can cast endless spells, and in certain great nations, he can even have a second spell. So they're quite powerful in that respect. So I think they're probably almost entirely unique in the way that they work. So they basically can shoot their bow in one of 2 ways. So they have a shorter range, so an 18-inch range shot, there's 3 spores, rem 1, damage 1, so 9 shots. Or they can do a 30-inch shot, which is 4 spores, no rend. So if you're closer, it's going to hurt, but they can do it. But then they've got some tricks that they can tier on top of that. So the champion can shine his light, and that allows you to shoot at a unit you can't see. So you can't hide from them. So if they can see you, he doesn't use his lantern, and if he can't see you, he does use his lantern. You have to do lofted, so you can't have if you're close but can't be seen, you don't get the additional rend. Then they have some metal weapons, and that's kind of again a theme that goes through the Venari units. So this is for missile units, their bows, and for combat units, their spears or lances. If you roll an unmodified 6 to hit, it's a mortal wound. So you've got 9 shots, 30 inches on a character. You're doing 1 mortal wound. But then, to make it a little bit better, there's a spell called the Power of Heish that they have, and the Wardens have, and the Dawn Riders have. You can do it multiple times. It's cast on a 5, and it takes that from a 6+ to a 5+. So on average, 9 shots from a standard unit is 3 mortal wounds, and then probably 1 or 2 more wounds against another unit. So I always take 2 units of these in a list because you can reliably kill a support character with them. Between them, they're doing 6 mortal wounds and a couple of other wounds, and you don't need line of sight. And that's hideous for things like Skaven, for Gits,
Witch elves, hags.
All those sorts of things. It's really good. Or even shooting, not a Marathi, but shooting at a big monster. You could be putting 7, 8 wounds on any model in the game, and they've got a movement of 6. So you've got a 36. Don't care whether you're hiding or not. I'm just going to plop death on your head. They are quite squishy. So Lumineth don't generally have high bravery, so they're bravery 6. Once they use their Ether Quartz crystal, their bravery goes down by 1. So they go to bravery 5. So we can talk about that a bit later on. But I think one of the other things I like about the army is all the different resources you have to manage. So you can only use 1 Ether Quartz per turn. You have to manage your Ether Quartz. You have to manage with Teclis which spells you're casting when. You have to manage your lightning reflexes, so which units are you going to use together. And the other one is you never get a lot of bodies, so you're managing a limited pool of bodies. So that's, I think, why I really like the army, because you have to think about lots of different dimensions to be successful with it.
Okay, that's interesting. So we've just talked about the Sentinels and how good they are. We all I can see Jim nodding on the video while you're talking, and I think they're a really great unit. And then you've got the Wardens, who essentially have all the same rules, but they've got spears instead of bows. So from a playtesting point of view, you've got these 2 very similar units pointed very closely. How easy or difficult was it to balance this to make them both viable and you want to take them both in the games? Was this a struggle, or was it fairly easy because there's a lot of precedent in other armies already? Paul, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So it's pretty tricky, to be honest with you. The survivability of the units is like a big thing. If they've got really cool abilities and they survive a long time, obviously these units are going to be quite expensive because they stick around. But in terms of the archers, they just don't survive. Whereas there's a rule that we haven't mentioned yet, which all the Venari units get, called the Shining Company.
Yep.
So this basically means that your coherency normally is everything has to be within an inch. Well, for the Shining Company to work, each model has to be in base contact with 2 other models, which means you have to really clump up your units. You can't spread them out and create lines to shield your ranks, etc., if you want to use this bonus. And the bonus is -1 to hit. So -1 to hit is really quite good, along with other ways to get -1 to hit in the army. This could be really, really strong. But it also prevents you from running and charging, so it really slows down your army. So not only are you balancing survivability and damage, but you're also balancing the movement and the getting around the board as well.
Okay.
So it's very, very tricky to take all 3 things into account at the same time. And honestly, it's just playing games with them, trying stuff out, seeing how they work is the best way to see where they sit against other armies. You can start from
I think
the base.
it's one of the things that makes all the units so viable and so appealing.
Right, they can squeeze out different play styles with the different units using all those, the bonuses they get.
Yeah, well, each unit offers you something different, and it means you've got no one direct powerhouse. Depending on how you want to do it or what you're missing, you take the units that you need. And as Paul mentioned, that the spears don't necessarily offer you the speed, but they offer you that ground, that position, and then you look at whether you're having it with shooting support. If you want that, you go to the archers. But if you want the speed to get about the board, you look at the cavalry instead.
Sure. Okay, so back to the spears. There's some combos with these, isn't there, to make them absolute bricks, and they're just not going to go anywhere. So, who's been building lists around those combos? Does anyone want to take that?
I can, because I run two 220s of these. Is really important. I think just to kind of pick up on the point Ricky was saying, I think the strength of the book is the way the units all support each other. if you go all in on one thing in this book, I think you lose out on a lot. If you have a bit of each, I think it was designed to be played that way. So, yeah, I mean, they've obviously got a 3-inch range. I don't think we've seen any other troop in the game with a 3-inch range. Obviously, you can't have more than 3-inch because you can then be outside combat and still fight, which would be an interesting rules issue. So again, they've got the some metal rules, but you can start to tier some things on them. So obviously, you can use your ether quartz to give them a rerollable armor save. So now we've got a 4-up rerolling armor save. Teclis, one of Teclis's own spells is a 5+ after save within a bubble. So now they've got a 4-up rerollable save and a 5-up after save. You can then make them ethereal with another spell from the deck. So now you've got ethereal 4-up rerolling armor saves with a 5-up ward. Then in the Shining Company, they're -1 to be hit when they're charged, and they get rend on their weapons when you charge them. And then with the Mountains, you can get an additional -1. So potentially they can be -2 to hit, 4-up ethereal, re-rolling armor saves, 5-up armor save, mortal wounds to you on a 5 or a 6, a load of attacks in a small block. So, yeah, they want you to charge them. And if you charge them, you're in a world of pain because obviously when they activate, another unit another friendly unit activates as well. So you get clobbered twice. But you think, oh my God, they're amazing. But they have to stay pretty much in you need to be 2 ranks deep to get the benefit of the Shining Company. They can't move that quickly. They don't cover that much space, a unit, and you need points elsewhere. So it's all achievable. And you could use the Caliphar to bounce Battleshock as well if you wanted to, but probably by that point you don't need to. But it's, you run out of points really quickly in the list because you really do need Teclis to start pulling that off. I think the other thing is I find personally the army has more command points generally than it knows what to do with because you don't really use them a lot. I only ever tend to use them for immunity to Battleshock.
Okay. What is there any interesting command abilities or no?
Not really. There's some generic ones. Eltharian's got one which makes you immune to Battleshock in a bubble. Teclis hasn't got one.
It's the Mountain King's got one that might be usable.
Yeah,
Adeline knows where all mine go. He just eats them.
Yeah, I think that's if you play more of an Aleph field theme, you use it there. But I find in more a kind of a Nari themed list, command points are the one resource you're not really managing that much.
Yeah, the small heroes don't tend to have command abilities, do they? So you're probably using them for like real ones to save when you're out of Aether Quartz, real ones to hit on your spears, whatever you need them for. But Battleshock immunity if you need it, or that's probably where they're going, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the combat units then. So we've spoke about the shooting, the magic. A lot of Age of Sigmar is just dealt with a giant melee unit coming over the board and smashing you. Do these guys have this? Is it something you can bring? You've talked about the spear units being really defensive. If someone charges, you've got all your defensive buffs up. You can probably grind a combat win out. But what about really taking the game over the table to someone? Is this possible in this army? Jim, do you want to take that one?
They don't have, I suppose the trade-off for the speed and all the intricacy rules they have is they don't have, for instance, Deepkin Eel damage unit. They don't have the elite, super fast, super self-reliant unit that can go off and delete a unit in one charge. They basically kill you by 1,000 cuts. Magic. They stand their ground, and that to Brian's point earlier, it is a player's army. No one uses that phrase, but in a sense where if you position your army correctly, you can do a whole lot of different things in one turn that you perhaps can't control or react to quick enough for it to be a detriment. So I really do. They don't have high damage. The King is probably the highest damage model, singular model, I think. Because Teclis doesn't really want to be in a fight. If Athanor gets into combat with you, you're going to get hammered into the ground, like literally, because his hammers are amazing. But beyond that, like I really like the Stone Guard, and they probably are the elite unit, right? They're the 2 wound, 4-up save guys. They're on big bases. They've got rerollable saves, they ignore rend, but they're still only 1 damage. There's no spells to increase their damage. And I think there's a trade-off there because as much durability is built into the book, it comes at the price of, where you would traditionally increase someone's damage in, say, like a Deepkin army, but they're like really a lot less durable than, say, like a Realm Lords army, which is durable, but at a trade-off, you lose the damage. So they are good. They obviously kill things, obviously, but they're not going to wipe you out in 1 turn, as I've seen some panic reacting to some of the scrolls leaking early. Because remember, when your opponents have played this army once, they'll go, oh, okay, Teclis is really important. And they might not realise just how important he is. And then the second time they play it, they'll come for him a lot sooner in a more controlled way. They'll try and remove him as early as possible. And it's something you have to manage as a Realm Lords player as well, is how do I protect Teclis enough to get 3 or 4 turns at them that allows the rest of my army to then go off and win the game? And there's a lot of pieces that you have to manage. So they don't really have it, but together they do. It's a combined effort.
Yeah, I get that. It's going to be good to see how it pans out because a lot of Age of Sigmar now is just like lining up that giant combo for that one unit to come blazing through and taking the game. Especially if you can clear an objective with a massive charge, and then you've not got an answer to that. Like how does this army shift like a big unit of Hearthguard off an objective, or how does it go and kill a Hagnar castle? Have they got answers to those sort of lists?
They've got some tricks, I think, and that's how things like the Stone Guard in Metrica can push units back, so you can push people off objectives potentially. Okay. Which is cool. a different mechanic than I think we've seen anywhere else. Can anything else push things around? I don't think so. No.
Not the old Warhammer where you had the pushback.
Pushbacks, 3rd edition. Yeah.
So what's the combo on that? How does that work?
So that's like the Shining Company rule for the Vanari, which is like your archers and your spearmen. This is for the Stone Guard, the guys with the big hammers and the hats.
Yep.
And the mountains as well. So basically, it's at the end of the combat phase, you get to push the unit back 2 inches, and then you get to pile in 1 inch. So you get to gradually sort of ease them back off the objective.
Okay.
So for instance, if you've got a hero that's on the edge of 3, to Paul's point, in say 2 places of power, or whichever ones the heroes can control. If you say my hero's on the edge of 3, Athanor goes in, he hits them, and says, "Okay, now you've got to move back 2. You're no longer controlling that objective." So it can matter in some very fringe cases. If you're struggling to deal with Marathi like I often do, you can push her off it. Because you might not be able to kill her, but you can push her back. So they do have some tricks, like Paul says, but it's also like they have different ways. Like to Brian's point earlier, the Sentinels, people underestimate how good it is just to bracket a monster. Take something like a Rogue Idol. If Brian does 6 mortal wounds turn 1, the Rogue Idol doesn't heal without magic support, which obviously Teclis can deny. And then all of a sudden the damage is massively reduced. So now that's another part of the durability as well, is they have different ways to slow you down. And I think something like a Hagnar castle will probably be debuffed, tagged, and knocked back to the point where they might not kill it, but they can contain it, which not a lot of armies can.
Yeah, okay. There's some good stuff coming here because, when you see the headlines, it's frightening, isn't it? Shock and awe. Teclis is going to blow you off the table, and all that sort of thing.
His shooting attack is really good.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. So let's talk about Teclis then. We've already touched on him a bit. He does some really cool stuff, and he's going to be a massive key to the list. Now, how many lists do you think you'll see out there without Teclis? It kind of reminds me a little bit of Marathi. It was like just the cornerstone to most of the Good Daughters lists. You still see good lists without her, but do you think Teclis is going to be the same? Do you think he'll get used a bit and then go away? And also, let's cover a bit while we're on the Teclis subject of how do you win with Teclis? And more importantly, how do you stop a Lumineth player winning with Teclis as well? So let's start with will he be in the lists? Rick, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, can do. I think yes. I think for the most part you will see him. I think he's what the book's about. So initially you I don't know, you'd be crazy not to. I don't think it's crazy because he's powerful. I think a lot of the way the book's built, as we've already discussed, he is able to support it. A lot of those tricks, a lot of the things you want to include that support the units and make the army work as a cohesive force can be done using him. The reliability that you get from the as you mentioned at the beginning, how his casting works. So whether you want that really big important one when you're probably slightly later game and there's less models on the table, but one very specific task you need to achieve, you can do that earlier in the game, depending on whether you're playing a more magic heavy opponent or not. You can go with your 2 casts. When we play tested, we did quite a bit with the combat heavy armies like Fire Slayers and stuff like that don't really have the magic defense. So you could go with 4. It's just having someone that is that toolbox in all those elements makes such a big key to writing these lists. And we keep saying on here already, it's about having different bits of the toolbox. He is the box. He's the one that's holding it all together, I think. So there are lists. I've certainly discussed one that I've sort of talked about quite early on with the mountains and the elite unit. But I think the main play style, the focus of it is definitely there. I know Paul could probably add a bit more on this because he spent a big time focusing on it, and I played against it more than I did with.
So what do you think, Paul? List without Teclis? Is there a few in there?
I think that you will see that over time. Teclis will probably drop out of a few people's lists because everybody will be wanting to use him to start with.
Of course.
But he's such a big point sink in your list that maybe when you get used to how the units work and how they synergize together, you can almost do it with the smaller casting heroes, do the same job but for less points and give you more bodies. But for me, he's just so iconic. I don't think I'd run an army without him.
Just because of the cool factor.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I found with him is you get spell blindness because he can cast so many spells. When you first play with him, you've got so much choice of what you're going to cast. You just almost get confused, and you just sit there looking at the list of spells, going, "What am I going to do now?" So early doors, I think that's a bit of an issue for people that have to push past. And once they've worked out what spells work in what situation, it's much easier to use him.
Yeah, I think that it touches on a little bit like when we've already said, I think Jim said it earlier, it's a player's army, as we keep saying. Once you've got you to grips with this army, you've played a good amount of games against a varied opponent and list, you'll start to learn there is that toolbox of spells and which ones are needed depending on your scenario or your opponent. And yeah, the build up to that and the learning of it will be difficult because there's so much there for him to do.
You talked about this earlier, didn't you, Brian? So you've got your 4 spells and you know your combo. So do you want to cover that now?
Yeah, so and first of all, I'll cover the question you asked about how do you deal with him. So if you can go before him and you can hit him at range, he hasn't got an after save. The best he can do is spend Ether Quartz to give himself a rerollable save. If he can go before you, it's a completely different matter. So generally, my first turn is, and again, this comes to kind of his 4 spells are a different resource you're managing. So your opponent might have 1 or 2 unbinds. So you have to think, well, which spells am I going to throw at you and try and draw those unbinds out? Because most of the time you do 4 spells on a 10+. You might, if you need to, do 2 on 12. I've never done 1 on 14. I've never found the need. But as Ricky said, if you've got to get a spell off, you do 1 spell on 14 and it just can't be stopped. It's just happening.
That's a glimpse behind the curtain there, I think, because it's automatic.
Yeah, it's just happening. Yeah. You give up trying to do anything against it. But yeah, if you're going with 4 spells, it's usually double command points. So every command point your opponent wants to use, and they have to spend 2. That's massive. That means immunity to inspiring presence is 2 command points. People really think hard about doing that, so you get that one off. The other big one you're almost always going to get off.
So just back to that one before you move on from that. So this is table wide as well. So it's a casting value of 8, and until your next hero phase, your opponent must spend 2 command points to use a command point instead of 1. So that is quite huge. So Teclis drops that, and all of a sudden, some armies just can't use a command point turn 1 because they only have 1.
No.
Yep.
Armies that use a lot of command points, things like Flesh Eaters. Who else soaks up a lot of command points? I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Ideneth,
yeah.
Turnus.
Yeah. So all those armies, you're really hitting them hard.
Yeah.
Nagash every turn as well wants to be using his Lord of the Undead. That's 2. It's going to cost you 2 CP a time now.
Yeah, and bringing things back from the grave sites. 2 CP.
Yeah.
Daughters of Cain when they can apparently fight in the hero phase.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
You don't need to do that much.
So you get that off, and that can be game changing. It can cripple some armies. Against other armies, it's not that effective, but it's just useful because people forget, because it's such a unique mechanic. People like, I've got 1 point. It gets to the Battleshock phase, they're like, inspiring presence. Like,
No.
You're 50%. You're 50% short. You're not doing that, so that's good. Then you do his protection of Teclis. So it's cast on the 10. Only he can cast it, and within if a friendly unit's wholly within 18 of him, they get 5 up after save. So you're typically playing with, in my list, your spears and your archers quite within the 18-inch bubble. He pops that up. So there, it's hard to see if you're casting 4 spells a turn that you don't do those 2.
Yep.
Then it depends. So, but if I'm going first, then I would use the spell portal.
Endless spell. Yeah.
Endless spell. Yeah, and then I'd throw Storm of Searing White Light, which is Teclis' other spell, through it, which is anything within 18
Pure damage output, isn't it?
Yeah, pure damage. 1, nothing happens. 2 to 4 D3 mortals. 5 plus D6. So you throw in that straightforward. You're hitting a load of their stuff. Other spells that I like using a lot with him. There's an ethereal spell. So that's really good. As I said earlier, if you're going to get charged, you can put it on the unit that's going to get charged. That's decent. There's Lambent Light, which allows you to re-roll misses when you shoot. So he's just got a toolbox. Because he knows all the spells, you've kind of then got this situational deck of, okay, it's turn 2, what am I doing? Or my opponent went first. You're probably not casting Portal and Storm of Searing White Light. You're casting other things. Also, I found he's got quite good movement by himself. So he's moved 12 with Unwounded. There's a spell that doubles your movement. So one of the issues that the army has is mobility. Turn 3 onwards, you often put that on himself, and he's then moving around the board. And at that point, he can finish units off. He's got quite a good ranged attack. So that's typically what you go for. But because he knows all of both laws, and there are some quite good endless spells in the book, he really has got a huge toolbox of options, and he makes all the other wizards better. He gives pretty much everyone +1 to cast around him.
I think you should mention his defensive magic aura as well.
Yeah.
Which is really good.
Yeah, so there's a couple of other things he can do. So if a spell's cast at him or within 16 inches of him to begin with, on a 4+, it's ignored, and then you pick one enemy unit with an 18 and they take D3 mortal wounds. So it just stops people throwing arcane bolts at you because it's just not worth it. 50% of the time it does nothing, and they can get the damage back. And a lot of spells that do damage don't do that much damage. So people are like, "Oh, is it worth doing that?" Obviously, it doesn't do anything to buff spells that buff your opponent's units themselves. But yeah, it's really good. He can also turn off one endless spell. He just does it, and he can automatically unbind. He can automatically unbind one enemy spell, as well as being able to do. I think he's got unlimited unbinds.
So how do you go about shutting all this down? Obviously, well, that's the wrong thing to say, really, because you're not going to shut all this down. So how do you go about managing the damage he's going to do to your army, or he's going to make his friendly units do to your army when you're facing against Teclis? Rick, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think. Well, I suppose as much as he's doing all those different things, there is always that first thing you should remember. It is one model. Sometimes actually let him do what he's doing, let him protect himself, but maybe look at what the rest of the army's doing and deal with that to start with. I think we've already said he is not super survivable. So if you can get him into a position where you can hit him, if you've got anything that's quite hitty, powerful, especially something that can fly over the top, you can get to him. There's not this army won't have lots and lots of bodies. It will be difficult to fully surround him and protect him like that, like you see with Nagash with skeletons. That's not the scenario you're going to get with this army. But there's no two ways about it. Even someone as powerful as magic as Nagash won't necessarily want to, or will try to go toe to toe with him as stopping him with his magic. So I think sometimes actually it's better to accept it's going to happen and look at what you deal with instead. I think another thing quickly from my point of view, when we did a bit of play testing at the early stages, I mentioned we sort of played up Fire Slayers and a few other armies like that against them. Actually, just getting into the army, we've already talked about that. Once you're there, a lot of the units are weaker. You're able to, if there's any sort of misplay or you get some good play from your half of the table, you can get into them. The units aren't spread out massively, because we talked about how the companies work with the deployment and positioning of the units. So you're able to, if you can, dictate that. They're not just going to string things out and block areas of space. They have to use the units individually in their little clumped patterns. So I think it's, good play can get you through the units and then into him.
One thing I would say is there's no real healing in the Realm-Lords list unless you take the Life Swarm and the spell. So any damage you do to him is going to stay on him. So if you can chip away wounds here and there, you do bring him down in terms of his movement and his aura for his anti-magic and that kind of thing. So if you've got the odd attack at range that can do 1 wound, 2 wounds, a mortal wound here or there, do it, because it will last the whole battle.
Yeah, sure, I get that. What about, so, like, bodies on the table in lists with Teclis in the list. Now, how does he stack up against other units? Because you guys have all said you're going to take him every time. And then I'm sat here thinking, so I can, for 700 points, I can get 5 units of the Sentinels. So it's not only is it 50 shots, well, not 50 because it's 9 per unit. It's a lot of shots, a lot of mortal wounds. It's 5 wizards as well on the table. And is that a trade-off that is you're going to lose a lot by not having Teclis on there? Or, if you go with the Dawn Riders, you have 5 units of them. You're going to gain a lot by not having this big model on the table, aren't you? Or is it not enough? Is it not enough just to have the extra bodies, the extra damage, the extra objective grabbers?
So, Teclis, one of his abilities is he adds 1 to casting and dispelling and unbinding rolls for all friendly Lumineth Realm-Lords units within what starts at 16. So the spell to go from 6 up to 5 up on your mortal wounds is on a 5. So now it's on a 4. Yeah. He's making everything better. The other thing that we didn't talk about is, in terms of army construction, you pretty much, if you're going down the Venari route, so cavalry, spears, archers, for each unit of spears, you can take 1 unit of archers or 1 unit of cavalry.
Yeah, so you've got to have spears, and so you've got to match them when
Yeah,
you take
and if
one,
you're
take
taking
another.
spears, it makes sense to have Teclis because he helps them out. So I've tried lists without Teclis. You end up putting one or two more units in and a couple of smaller heroes if you go that route. Obviously, you can do the Alithar list, which is the mountains and the guard. That's a different list. But I think if you're playing Venari, he makes the list so much better. He's also just loads of fun to play with.
I'd agree.
He just makes you think because he can do so much, but you've got to make sure you do the right thing, and he really makes your opponent think. And when we were testing it, we were also testing the Zinch book. So him against Lords of Change is really interesting.
The whole army versus Inch is interesting because the amount of points that you give your opponent from casting spells to summon things is crazy.
And they can potentially shut him down. It's quite easy. They've just got to roll 1/5, a Lord of Change to stop him. So.
Okay. So there's a lot of options there for shutting him down. Right. We've talked a lot about the Teclis Realm-Lords. Let's have a look at some of the other things in the book. And one of the real cool ones for me is Altharion. None of you mentioned him yet. So how does he fit into the lists and the game plans?
I don't think you can use him with Teclis because it's just too many points. That's the biggest issue. If you've got Teclis in your list
and nowhere to put your command trait.
Yeah,
sure, okay.
If you're not running Teclis, you can put him in the list, and he's really good fun. He's great. He's a solo piece. He's one of the few Realm Lords units that kind of acts independently. He can run around and do his thing, but it's once you've decided to take Teclis, you really struggle to fit him in your list because the points just disappear.
Okay. Assuming you wanted to play him, then how does he fit in? How do you get the best from him?
I think you use him a bit like Marathi. So because the list generally wants to play in a clump, so even if you're not taking Teclis, you still want things quite close to each other. As Paul said, you can put Altharion out on a flank by himself, and he'll murder anything light. He's very capable like that, but you're giving up a lot to get him in because if you take Teclis and him, it makes the core block of your army almost too small to be viable.
Yeah, sure.
So I think over time you'll see him used because he's an absolutely stunning miniature. And he can do that. He's like a Marathi light. You can put him on deploy him on a flank by himself and let him do his own thing. And he's not that many points. I think he's reasonably costed, but for me, he doesn't add anything to all the other units, where a lot of the other pieces in the book do add things to other units.
He does have some decent survivability, doesn't he? For his, as you say, for an individual piece, which is nice.
So I think Realm Lords struggle in the hero-based missions a bit because they haven't got much to go onto those objectives and hold them. And he's one of the pieces in the army that can do that job.
Yeah, I think he really complements. Like if you're taking a spear-heavy unit, non-Teclis heavy army, he's probably the one hero you put in for his survivability, and also because the other smaller heroes are more like utility pieces. They want behind units away from damage. He actually doesn't mind being on the front and tagging the edge of a corner. So I think he certainly has his uses, and I think you'll see people use him just because of the love of him previously. But he is good. But yeah, to Paul's point, you won't have both him and Teclis in the list because you're running out of points and you lose your artifacts, your command abilities quite quickly. So it's one or, I think, but he certainly has a place. It's just his role in the army isn't quite as reliable as Teclis. Like Teclis brings that reliability to all the casting and all the synergy that you need, that you know you can rely on as a player. So I think people will go for that favour each time. But he's, as Brian said, he's one of the best miniatures I've seen. Like he's a miniature, and I think you'll see hobbyists paint him up and enjoy his rules. His rule set is a lot of fun. He's got a lot going on with his rule set.
No, he's good. He's good. Okay, so there's a couple more heroes still in the book. So we've talked about the Cathalar already. Now, this passing off the emotional transference, passing off your Battleshock test, especially in combination with the Eclipse spell, double your command points. So if you're trying to ignore Battleshock tests, is pretty savage, isn't it? Just anyone want to go into the details of exactly how this can work? How about you,
so I've
Paul?
got a big unit of 30 wardens, which are the spear guys, and they're in the list. I kind of almost wrote my list to do this trick because I just love it so much. So basically, you have your big defensive unit, and it sits there and goes, "Well, come on then, come and fight me, come and kill me," because you want to die. You don't want to survive. You want at least half your unit to die. As long as you're set up with the total eclipse and your opponent hasn't got enough command points or hasn't got a hero nearby, they charge him. So let's do eels because Jim's here. So let's do a Deepkin reference. You charge him with
kill my eels. Yeah.
You charge him with your big unit of attacking eels. So they charge in and they smash this unit of 30, and they say they kill 20 out of the 30. The remaining 10 guys, they kill an eel. They fight back, they kill an eel. So when it gets to the Battleshock phase, your Cathalar is sat behind the unit, and you roll a dice, and on a 1, it doesn't work. So there's still a bit of a chance it won't work automatically. But on a 2-up, you take your Battleshock modifier, so -20, and then you apply it to your opponent's unit that's taken the casualty. So the eels sitting there, the 8 remaining eels out of the 9, are going to be on a -21 Battleshock test.
And it's going to cost me 2 command points to
Well,
save
it's to
them.
stop it, yeah, if you've got a hero within range to do it as well. So you have to move your hero up with them.
I'm just
Otherwise,
glad you
they're just
referenced your Deepkin and not my Hearthguard Berserkers there.
Well, you just spend a command point and off you go.
2.
So how many armies?
Oh,
How many armies out there currently rely on just not taking any damage to win? And if you just think about that, how many units out there go, I'm only probably going to lose 1 or 2 models a phase. Maybe the Berserkers are a good example. I think Brian mentioned his Chaos Knights. It happened to them, and other units.
More tech guard.
More tech guard.
Well, no, they wouldn't take it because you're immune to
yeah,
Battleshock
of
in.
course, yeah.
both
Yeah.
units.
Yeah, immunity still applies, doesn't it? Even though it's
I think
the
the Bone Splitters, looking at the big amounts of bodies and then just letting them take a little at a time, and you see the way they string them back out a little bit and only take the damage in small areas. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter because if they've done a load of damage to you first, you just chuck it back at them.
And even like Paul's example of 20 is probably a bit extreme. Let's look at it of you've got a unit of 5 Dawn Riders, it's 10 wounds there, and you've chucked them into a combat. You've lost 7 or 8 wounds, 4 die, let's say. Then the Cathalar, and they kill 1 back, so they've gone first. They've charged, they've fought first. They've done a bunch of wounds to your opponent. They've almost all died back. Or even, does it happen if they wipe out? No, you can't.
No.
You've got
But
to
there
have
is
at
no
least 1
Battleshock.
model left, yeah.
Yeah.
And then even adding 4 to a Battleshock test, it's pretty bad, isn't it? Especially if you've killed a few models yourself, maybe another 3 or 4 you've already killed. It can soon rack them numbers up. It doesn't have to be on the really scary side of numbers.
No, and the other thing you can do is you can unit. So say you shoot a unit that's within the range and they've taken a casualty, then the unit that's in combat can bounce the Battleshock onto that unit rather than the one they're fighting.
Okay.
So
yeah,
you
I
can
get
chip
that.
away.
It doesn't have
Chip
to
away
be.
a dude. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyone else for that unit was slain during the turn. It doesn't have to be the unit that's fighting, does it?
No.
No.
So you can go in and you can kill 10 of those dudes, and within the range, which is 18, is it? I think it might be 18. You can have a more elite unit that you want to kill. Say you had a unit of evocators or something comes in and blasts my unit of 30 and kills 10, and then there's a unit of 4 Dracolines or something within 18 that take a casualty. All of a sudden, you can just remove that unit of 4 Dracolines with the casualties you take out of the other combat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the other
bad.
thing you can do in combination with this, so there's a spell called Voice of the Mountain, so it's cast on a 6. If you cast it, all enemy units on the table are at -2 bravery for that turn, and the next turn they're at -1 bravery. So in your example, Ben, where you put the 4 Dawn Riders in, and you kill 1 model, so that's 5, -2 bravery. It's effectively a -7 Battleshock test already.
So in example like the Berserker unit, you can tag them on the corner with a unit of 10, even though they fight twice and they do the Conga with the 2-inch reach, unlikely to kill 10 models, and then they got a massive Battleshock slam coming into them, or even not that. You charge, you got your 30 berserkers, you shoot them and kill one. You charge your Dawn Guard into a unit of Volkites or something, and then transfer the Battleshock onto the berserkers. So it's a really, really interesting mechanic that will get you just do some. I think it will do some crazy things. There'll be some combos that come out of this. However, it's on a lovely little lady with 5 wounds and a 5 save. Movement 6.
And it's still on a 2-up as well, because you'll roll the 1 at that key moment in the game.
39 out of 40 die. We're going to transfer it to a big block and then a roll a 1. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. Yeah. But it is also Battleshock dependent, so there's a lot of units out there that just ignore that. Yeah. So how many points is Cathalar?
140? Yeah, 140.
Cool. No, seems about right for... there's plenty of single little characters like that with wacky abilities, so I think it fits
squishy,
quite nicely.
Quite easy to take off. Okay,
so there's not actually many units in the faction, is there, so far? So we've got the mountains, the 2 mountain units, I guess, the Stone Guard and the 2 variants of the mountain. Then you've got the 3 kind of rank and file plus some heroes. So do you see all of these being mixed together in lists? Brian, do you think it's one of everything, or do you think people will go mountain stuff or the more infantry stuff, or you think you see all of it?
So the list I'm running is Teclis, 2 units of 20 Wardens, 2 units of 10 Sentinels, Avalanar, who's the hero mountain, and the portals, and then either one of the 2 smaller mages, either the Cathalar or the Stone Mage, because they're both useful, or some Dawn Riders, kind of flip between them, or potentially, I think you can ally in Eels, so or potentially 3 Eels is quite good. So for me, the units I don't really touch are the Guard, because they don't really fit into my list, but yeah, I think there's a good mix, and I think it's probably worth talking about. Sorry, not Avalar, Alarith, the spirit. Is it? It is Alarith, isn't it? The name. No,
Pronunciations.
Avalanor is the king, and Alarith is the faction. It's confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, Avalanor. It's worth talking about him because he's
so good.
So in my list, essentially, a Shining Company gives you -1. He then gives you another -1 on top of that to be hit. So you're and that's not melee. That's just. I think it is just.
No, if you're just within 12 of him.
Yeah. So if you're within 12 of him, you're at -1 to hit.
And then one of the
Shining Company.
Yeah. Shining Companies. Okay.
That's the Venari rule. But he's got a decent shooting attack, a 1-shot shooting attack. But if he charges, he's got with his hammers 6 attacks on 3s, Ren 1, damage 5. He's got Ether Quartz, so he can re-roll to hit. And if he doesn't charge, he's got 7 attacks.
Is there a way to buff attacks?
No.
His command ability does, but he can't apply it to himself because he's not an elf.
Yeah. But
he can give it to the spear guys in front of him, right, or next to him.
Not the spear guys. He can give it to the guard.
That's right. Yeah, sorry, the stone guard. Yeah, the guys with the hammers.
Yeah. So he can be a beast in combat, and he's got a really good. If he's near a stone mage, which is why I have to take them, he counts as taking 0 wounds up for his profile when he fights. So his hammer's always 5 damage, and he's Ren 3. Because he's Alarith, he ignores Ren 1, and in Metrica he ignores Ren 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But he's slow.
He's
slow, isn't he?
Yeah, he's only moving 6.
He is.
You can do double move on him, so he can move 12?
Yes.
Can he run and charge, or no? Is he only run and charge in the book?
No. But essentially I play 2 blocks of spears, with each one with a line of archers behind, Teclis in the middle, and Avalanor in front between the two. So you're playing in a clump, so it limits your mobility, but it's a real unpleasant place if you come into it, because in combination with lightning reflexes, you charge in, the spears fight, and he piles in the side and smashes the living daylights out of you. Yeah, every time we're using against Jack's comment is, how many attacks has he got? How much damage does he do? Yeah, he's good. The other one's good as well. He's got slightly less attacks, but he's got higher rend, hasn't he? Yeah, he's rend 2, so he's got 4 attacks that are rend 2, damage 5. But the other one isn't a hero, so that will catch loads of people out and they'll play it wrong.
Ah, okay.
Only the named one is a hero. The unnamed one is just a monster. He's not a hero. I think when we play tested it, every time loads of us were like, "Oh, give him this artifact." Oh no, he's not a hero. You can't do that.
It's because he's got a command ability, and it took us a while for us to go, "Oh yeah, you don't have to be a hero to use a command ability."
Yeah, I don't know if he's the only model in the game at the moment to have a command ability and not be a hero.
Outside of Bone Reapers don't really count, do they? So yeah, he's probably the only one.
There might be one of the Forge World things, maybe, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
sure.
thinking 8 units of bows. No, you can't do that because you've got to have the 2-to-1.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
Yeah.
So 6 units of bow. Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking Teclis, the mountain, and then just all shooting. But no, it's not going to work. That's a shame.
No.
You have to have at least 2 units of spears in there.
So yeah, six units of bows, 2 units of spears, the mountain.
No, you've got to have 6 spears to have 6 bows.
No. That's only for battle line. So you can have as many as you like, but it's a 1-for-1 for the battle line.
Yeah.
So 2 units of spears, 6 units of bows, the mountain, and Teclis.
That's your list, Ben.
That's the list. Maybe not. We'll see. Okay, so while we're talking lists, then I want to talk about what you guys are leaning towards. So we've just talked about Brian's. So let's have Jim next. What are you playing? What would be, if we're going to a tournament next weekend with these, what would you be taking? And also, more importantly, what would you want to face and what matches would you be hoping to avoid?
Yeah. Well, I'd be taking the Alarith Temple Battalion with Teclis, Stone Mage, Avalanor, because he's amazing, 3 units of Stone Guard in 10, 10, 15. And that comes in at 2 drops, and they basically can reroll saves because of the battalion. They're ignoring -2 rend. I've obviously got my Aether Quartz across the army. I've got, Avalanor, we just mentioned all his abilities. I've got Teclis' casting in there. But I am low on numbers. And once you do hurt my guys, they don't come back. I wouldn't like to play something like a Fire Slayer army. Because, if they've got pole arms or as much as I ignore -2 rend, you still fail saves, right? It's only a 12 save. You still 2 damage a time. You're still losing a guy for every fail. So that's what I'd be taking. I know Les was into something very similar as well. We were discussing it for ETC back in the day. But that's what I'd be taking. I think he can win 4 to 5 games. I wouldn't want to play KO because they could remove Teclis early. And then I'd be in a lot of trouble. I wouldn't want to play a Horde army either. Something like, a huge Gitz army at -3 to hit. Something that can easily outnumber me. And swarm objectives, because I can't smash and clear objectives. Because knocking back a goblin isn't going to do anything. They're going to skitter and scutter around, jump on each other, and get back into formation. So it's not going to really do a whole lot. So those are the armies I've been looking to avoid. Probably Tzeentch with the horrors as well. They could swarm me. They might not kill me, but they can swarm me, and they can weight of dice me off, with their shooting. So that would be another issue. So those, but again, I quite happily play something like Deepkin. All their reels at -2 rend charging aren't going to do anything to me. And Teclis obviously can do a whole lot back, and so can Avalanor. So, yeah, that's probably what I'd be taking.
And what would you be using Teclis for in the list? What would you be...
So Teclis gives the 5-up shrug to the Stone Guard, but he also gives a breakaway piece because, as Brian mentioned earlier, mobility is an issue. So I do this with my my liege and my bone reaper army. When it gets to the mid game and units have come off objectives and you need someone to break away to a back objective, Teclis can be that guy. He can double his movement. He can get to the back of the board on his own. Even if he's only on 4 or 5 wounds, you can still double his move. He can still get there. Obviously, a run as well. He also obviously denies magic. His magic defense, isn't he? He's going to shut down the mortal wound output coming at my guys. You know, I ignore Rend 2, but I don't ignore mortal wounds. So that's another thing, spell damage. And also, he's a bit like a Neo-Taunt character, isn't he? You sort of put Teclis down, and everyone goes after him, which allows the Stone Guard to get mid-board, get set up, and get to work. A little bit like Marathi, but obviously not as good as Marathi at that role, but he certainly serves that, and he can take a bit of heat off the rest of the army. Because, I mean, if you're looking to pick it apart, you'd go after the Stone Mage, the floaty one on the rock, because she does a whole lot for the army. She's a really important piece. And then maybe you go after Avlanor as well and ignore the Stone Guard, because they don't do mass damage. But the army's still really good. It's got a lot of tricks. I think the pushback from the Alarith will catch some people out on objectives. And if you use it well, because you're not allowed to be within an inch of any unit. So if you multiple charge, you can really push unit back, quite well. So it's really useful, but that's what I'll be using. I think that's what I'll be taking.
Okay, no, it sounds good. So who wants to go next? Rick, do you want to go? Because you're looking at the mountains, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I think the list I've sort of looked at is similar approach to what Jim's just talked about, but it just doesn't have Teclis in it. Straight off the bat, I'd be looking at one of each of the mountings. I think something we talked about is that the actual Stone Guard with the hammers, they don't do huge amounts of damage, but there are a number of ways you can support them to do more damage. Obviously, we've talked about the Stone Mage and adding the Battleshock into the damage to opponents. So having at least one slightly larger unit of, say, 15 or 20 Stone Guard with the support of both the mountains. You've got the command abilities we talked about earlier from the mountains, adding an attack to the attacks characteristic. Well, each of the mountains has a command ability of which is different but adds an attack. So actually you can stack up a number of attacks on them relatively early on. They've got the pushback mechanics we talked about to help shuffle enemy units off of the objectives and areas of board that you want to remove them from. And also one of the rules we haven't really talked about with the Stone Guard is that every roll of a hit of a 6 adds 1 to the damage. So they actually do get to the damage too. Now, when you've only got 2 attacks each, yes, I know that's not... your averages on 6s aren't very high, but when you're adding 2 more attacks to it from the 2 command points, your chances of hitting those 6s are more. So then you're starting to look at that red 1 damage 2 is coming through.
Yeah. So you're not going to be able to do the double stack because the Unshakable Faith calls that out as only being able to use... A unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once and cannot benefit from this and the Faith of the Mountains command. So you can't do both on the same unit, but you can get 3 attacks per model...
Yes,
popping 2 damage on 6s, no problem.
And you've got your lightning reflexes, so 2 units are going to go as well,
so,
which makes it even more potent.
Yes,
so
definitely. I think it's good.
Ricky, if you play with these, do you tend to go mallets over picks? So you go the extra damage instead of the mortal wounds?
So one of the first lists I wrote actually had a smaller unit that had the mortal wounds in them, but the slightly larger unit was focused on but for me it's the damage. If you want the big rend, the big damage, or the mortal wounds, you get it elsewhere. I think the unit does what it does, but I think that having that damage in multiple amounts of attacks is where it's at for me.
Gosh, when I saw the models, I was like, picks or mallets, and then I saw the models, I was like, mallets.
But for me, it's a nice. Cool. It's just a nice it's a nice core of the list, and then you haven't got the point sink that we discussed that Teclis takes there, so you can. I've only mentioned the fact that we've got the Stone Mage and Avlanor in there so far, but you can add a Cathalar. You can add any of the heroes, can't you? Really, Altharion, if you wanted that piece to stand on the outside, he doesn't need the support of the rest of it, and then you can still get some of the Dawn Riders in, or wherever you want your battle line to go. Look at that. I just liked that you've got this core that isn't the full list, and you've got the flexibility because you haven't included Teclis in it. And for me, that's what I liked, because it allowed you to vary it up a little bit without rewriting the list if you remove someone like Teclis.
Plus, the spirit hits like a truck as well. So you could have him and the named king on bookending a unit, just absolutely pounding them into craters. They do a lot of damage, I think, more than people realise. Like you heard Jack's reaction earlier, but they do a lot of damage if you don't get to them.
I think they're
even if you
protected in
do,
that as
with
well.
the Stone Mage sitting there, they're on the top profile fighting, so that just they're always kicking out that
You've
damage.
got to get to him first.
Yeah.
The Stone Mage is like the key piece. You can get rid of that. It takes a bit of ability from because away, but although the model was quite Marmite, wasn't it? Some people thought they didn't like it. Some people did. I think it's quite cool on the rock.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So, what about the multiples of the Spirit of the Mountain with because they've got the shooting attack, 30-inch range, D6 damage, 3s to hit, 2s to wound, rend 2. You get 4 of them on the table. Anyway,
you
buff
can.
shooting.
You can. You probably can't, can you? Because of the points, I think. 4 behemoths plus battle line plus heroes.
Yeah, because
the
stone you can have the Stone Guard as battle line, so you have 3 into 5 of those, 1 hero and 4 of them. I think
because you need a character, so you could have.
You just get for the cheapest one, don't you?
Yeah.
You can do it. You can do it.
Yeah, you can do it. No, you can do it.
So,
but we've already talked about the fact that the book in general is light. I think if you're going to that light, it's cool. I'm not sure you'd be looking at it on the competitive edge.
A great hobby army. I can imagine Paul doing it on one of his amazing display boards with all these mountains moving. But you would struggle to score objectives with 15 lads.
Yes.
You might have a tough time.
Okay, then, Paul, lay it on us. What are you playing? What's your
So
plan?
I've gone down the Teclis route. So I've got Teclis, but I've got one of each of the Cathalar and the Stone Mage. Then I've got a big block of 30 Wardens and a block of 10. 5 of each of the Dawn Riders and 10 of each of the Sentinels. And then I've got 50 points left over, so I've gone for one of the endless spell, the Sanctum endless spell. But it could be any endless spell in there for that. I quite like the look of the Sanctum for the benefit it could give a unit. So I don't think it fits around Teclis. So otherwise it would be really good.
Endless spells are good, aren't they, though? Like, I've been thinking about the bridge for the Stone Guard army. You put them all around the bridge the army because Teclis can do it, and then all of a sudden your mid-board and your mobility is counted.
Yeah, so I got that 50 points of flexibility. What it is, basically, is I want to do the Cathalar trick, so the 30 Wardens really help for that. I like the Dawn Riders as models, and I actually think you need the mobility in the army, so that's why I've got 2 units of 5, and they're really good at clearing the chaff units out. Their attacks mechanics really clever for getting rid of those 1 wound screen units. I don't think we've touched on it. Basically, they get +2, so it's a bit like the Deepkin Thralls. They get more attacks against 1 wound models. They get +2 attacks each against the 1 wound models.
And +1 attack against 1 or 2 wounds.
Yeah, so against 2 wound models, they're +1 attack. So they
especially Stormcast.
Yeah. So they're really. I mean, you go into I don't know your Skaven chaff screen or your 1 wound skeletons or whatever you think you've got there, your chain rasps, something like that, and they're really 5 of those kick out so many attacks.
It gives you weight of dice against something like a Mortek Guard block, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Especially as they do mortal wounds, so they're really quite good for that, actually. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so they've got the wizard, so they can pop the power Heish or Heish or whatever you call it. So it's a 5+, so they're running in with 4 attacks a model from the Guardian Swords, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, rend 1. So it's 4, what's that, 20 attacks? So
20 attacks from 5 dudes.
4 or 5 mortal wounds, plus a bunch of rend 1 wounds as well. And then the Dashing Hooves also chuck a cheeky wound in with a 4+4+, 2 attacks a model. It's quite a lot, isn't it? It's just a bunch
volume
of dice.
Yeah, volume of dice, and you can do speed of Heish on them, so they double their movement. So that makes them movement 28, so they can get around the board and grab those objectives that you need to grab that people don't see you getting near. And I'm also playing in the nation of. So we haven't really mentioned many of the nations, but Zatrek, which is the one that gives me the extra spell on all my champion, so they've all got 2 of the spells of the lore. So I've got a great choice of spells in the right place at the right time. And they're all going to be +1 or +2 to cast if they're near Teclis. So they're going to get off their Power of Heish, the 5-up Mortal Wound spell on 3s. So it's pretty reliable. They're going to be doing the 5s most of the time. And on that many attacks, 20 attacks, did we say? On 5-ups for Mortal Wounds?
Yeah, so it's cast on 6, so it'll go down to 4s.
4,
so
sorry,
cast on 6, down to 4s, and 20 attacks. So we've got a choice of swords or lancers on these as well now? You just go for swords every time?
No, the champion, the champion gets the sword and everybody else has a lance.
Ah, got you, I see.
I think, or is it the other way around? Yeah.
Yeah, they've all got lances. The champion can choose a sword, so he gets +1 attack. Okay, got you. Yeah. All right, so that's cool. So they're running in with 1 to 3 attacks a model, 3s to hit, 5s potentially pop to a mortal, 4s to wound, but it's 3s to wound on the charge. No rend.
Yeah.
Okay, but reach.
Yeah,
2.
but rend 1 on the charge.
Can they aid the quartz to reroll hits?
No, we're +1 to hit. I think it is. For
+1, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you've got a hero nearby, obviously you could do reroll 1s, so they'd be hitting 2s, rerolling 1s. So in effect, the same thing.
Just the KO with the triumphs, isn't it? That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
They're a nice unit, that, I think.
Yeah, that's what I quite like them. For the points that you pay, I think, they're 130?
Yeah.
28-inch move is no joke.
No.
When you see someone move 20 inches, you go, wait, what?
And often that 28-inch move is to get you on a back objective that's probably got a smallish unit to protect it, something that they've left behind, and they can deal with that unit.
It's not a run, so they can charge after it.
Yeah, so would you do a unit of 10 of them? 260
I have considered it.
2-inch reach with the lancers, so they're going in against the infantry unit. They're going in with 3 attacks a model on the lance, so that's 30 attacks. Popping on 5s for 10 mortal wounds. Do the
but 2 5s attack at the same time, so it doesn't matter.
If they don't move 28 inches.
Oh no, that's true. Only 1 would.
Yeah, the spell only goes on the 1 unit.
Yeah,
so that's what,
that's true. Yeah.
The 10 is quite good.
I
isn't
like
it?
that. Yeah. So just think of the damage it'll put out. If that runs over and does 10 mortal wounds, when do you do your spell? So you do the spell in the hero phase as well. So you know before you move them. So you got 2 units of 10. You go cast. Oh, okay. One of them got off. So then we'll put the double move on them. So you pretty much know that you're getting your 5.
If you're running Teclis, you can just auto cast one of those anyway. The speed, so you know that's going.
You cast it on a 10, aren't you?
Does Teclis have that spell
every
as well?
time.
Yeah, Teclis has all the spells. So he doesn't have the weapon spell.
He knows the lore.
The movement spell, yeah.
Yeah, so they cast their own power heesh, then once that's cast, you can decide if you want to slingshot them.
Yeah.
28 inches.
Yeah.
10 of them running with 10 mortal wounds plus... 3s to hit? Are they in addition as well, or are they instead?
Yeah, no, instead.
Instead, okay. Yeah, so...
But they're rend 1 on the charge, so it gives them a little more punch as well.
Rend 1 and 3s to wound as well.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredibly hard-hitting unit for maybe not ultimate out-and-out power, but like precision. 28 inches, charge, 10 mortal wounds plus a bunch of other wounds. Not a lot stands to that, and then 10 bodies on an objective.
Yeah, no.
Plus maybe a Cathalar if you can.
If you can get it nearby, yeah.
I think sometimes we talk about
That'll be the
heroes,
problem.
Some of those supporting heroes that sit on the flanks, a bit like Jim said earlier with his Bone Reapers. You can push these types of heroes out with 7 or 8 wounds. Actually, that unit can go and catch them and get rid of them as well.
Yeah, that would be extremely frustrating if they just nuked my liege, wouldn't it? I'd be like, oh, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Thing is,
one thing I would say is that the army doesn't have any teleports, so you can't get guys to support the teleports and things like that. They are restricted to where they can move.
And fly as well. There's only Teclis that flies, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the characters.
Yeah.
It's only him.
Yeah.
Oh, the Stone Mage might, because he's on a rock, floating on a rock. I don't know if he does.
So either way, there's not much fly. There's not much teleport. We've got a list as well.
The Stone Mage can't fly.
There's no fighting out of sequence. Only your lightning reaction. There's no always strike first. There's no fighting in the hero phase or moving in the hero phase. There's no teleporting. There's no massive combat punch. There's
no summoning.
There's no
You're not getting
summoning.
extra bodies.
Yeah, there's no hordes. There's a lot of stuff it's not got. There's a lot of stuff it does have, and that will be powerful. But there's also a lot of opportunities for taking advantage of weaknesses. So I'm looking at this Dawn Rider Lance now. 2 to 3 units.
You've gone off the Sentinels, have you, Ben?
No,
the Sentinels have been big.
I'm thinking Tecilis, 3 units of 10. Why is it? Yeah, that's the one. Just turn after turn. Right, this turn, you're going over there. No,
Boom,
you're going.
boom. You've got to remember, though, if they fight anything that's got more than 2 wounds, they are much less powerful. So if you come up against
I was enjoying
ogres,
myself.
if you come up against ogres,
the dream, Ben.
you're on 1 attack each, Ben.
No, forget it.
That's been a good story with facts.
Back to the bows.
I think the other thing is the endless spells. I mean, I'm a big fan of Rune of Petrification. It's if you can get this off, especially with the shackles in combination, it is absolutely hideous, especially on characters. You just melt them.
Yeah, so the way this one works is it hits twice in each movement phase. So at the start of the movement phase, you roll a 4+ for all units within 6 inches. On a 4+ to take a D3, and then you do it again at the end of the movement phase. So in the Lumineth player's turn, he casts it in his hero phase. The enemy's going to take it twice in the following movement phase. If you get a double turn, you're doing it again. So you're hitting them 4 times when you get a double turn. If you're not getting a double turn, your opponent's still going to get hit at the start of the movement phase. So they're still getting hit at a minimum of 3 times. It's not predatory neither, is it? So it just sits there. So you've got to move away from it. So you chuck it on an objective where you know they're going to be staying. They've got to just sit and take it.
Yeah, it doesn't affect you.
Doesn't affect you. Yeah.
Takes 1 from their run and charge rolls.
Nice.
Yeah, and then if you put
which is good, really good.
You put shackles on them as well.
Stop them moving.
Yeah, you're staying there. Have some of that. It's quite expensive, but I am a big fan of it. It's because it's almost like the vortex, the warp lightning vortex, but kind of different. It's kind of more destructive, but in a smaller area. But it's quite a big model, you know, and within 6 inches of it, that's probably I don't know, it's like a 14-inch circle that it's affecting.
Yeah, it's quite good.
I always like things that affect your opponent's positioning, you know, their movement. It keeps them out of that bubble, doesn't it? They don't really want to go in unless they have to.
Yeah, I mean it's cast wholly within 18, so you're not affecting your opponent first turn.
And it's easy for Teclis to cast, right? But it's cast on an 8, so to dispel this bad boy, you've got to hit that 9.
That's rough.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just to get people aren't even going to attempt it.
Yeah, most common casters won't. Unless you've got the buffs.
A lot of points, though.
It's a lot of points, but remember, Teclis can move it around as well because he's got his auto dispel of an endless spell. If you cast it in one area of the battlefield at the start and you need to move it somewhere else, he can just do that without having to worry about it.
Yeah,
it's a good one to cast just in front of yourself. So, you know, you cast it sort of 5 inches away from yourself. Somebody comes in, they're going to be in combat with you for a couple of turns, and it's just sitting behind them, grinding him.
Especially if you got a Catalar as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Because then that unit in the back actually it did lose somebody, and now they have to take battle shots. It's 2 CP to stay, or you'll be able to do your Catalar ability. You know, it's a little bit of extra just in case you do get wiped out by the charge.
Yeah.
So this Catalar ability, my cogs are whirring. Is there any way you can use some naughty endless spell tactics to then teleport wounds across the battlefield to someone else?
Yeah, no, you could move him with the bridge, couldn't you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. He could be bridged.
So yeah, pick one friendly Lumineth Realm-Lords unit within 18 of this model and roll a dice. On a 2+, don't take a battle shot. So you could go, right, my turn 1, my opponent's got no command points left yet. I will cast Pendulum through the unit, kill 2 or 3 models, and then we will, put Cathalar on to teleport them onto someone else who we've shot. Again, your 5 Chaos Knights or whatever, you shoot one dead, you've used your own endless spells to do some damage to your friendly units, and then you transfer them wounds. It's just naughty, isn't it?
It's also, in testing, it's really good for screens. Like, you could put 10 guys down, and you wouldn't want to kill 5 or 6 of them with a mortal wound, or, to get your pile in, so 3 to get extra space, because they would then be able to take Battleshock, and the Catalar could then use that against you. So you actually think, I do need to wipe that out, because otherwise the Catalar could affect me. Because you're using all your command points to use your abilities. And later in the game, when you've only got like 10 lads left, you can send, touch the edge of a unit, lose 4 or 5, and go, right, Catalar's going to battle shock that unit over there, which is on the objective, and all of a sudden you've lost the objective because of the numbers. It's cool.
So it's also the mind games that everyone knows wins Warhammer of, I'm going to put this guy here behind this screen, so if you kill my screen, I can put the Battleshock wounds on you, and your opponent's going, right, and then you aggressively measure your bubble of how far. So if you come into this area, I could Battleshock you.
Then you roll the 1.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, then you roll a 1, everyone goes,
That would definitely happen, especially when you set it all up and you lose your 29 wardens or whatever it is you've lost, Paul.
Yeah.
Or they just shoot your Catalar off with magic, and then they're like, attack, and then they go, right, that's it. Gaze and Wrathy dead.
Literally stand it touching Teclis and say, there's 5 extra wounds for Teclis. You're going to have to shoot these first. No, it's all good. So I think we've covered most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. So we've got our initial thoughts on the book, play styles and list building. We've got some details in there as well. So one of the things that I wanted to cover that we sort of talked about a bit earlier was the meta. How does this fit in with what's out there already? How does it fit in with the things that are winning at the moment? Will it shake things up? What's going to really soundly beat a Realm Lords army? And what will the Realm Lords come out and just put in the place? Who wants to take this one?
So I would say KO. If you're running a Teclis list, you do not want to see a KO army against you. You really don't, especially if it's one that's a 1-drop or a 2-drop. You are in proper trouble because you're going to lose Teclis turn 1 pretty much 99 games out of 100.
So if you table edge Teclis and put your screen on the 12-inch line, is he still getting shot off?
Yeah, Ziflin list, easy.
Yeah, okay.
Zinch, I think, issues because you're giving them so many summoning points with all your spells. And they can stop
would like to see
spells.
These.
Yeah. I think they're the two for the Teclis build. And then I think against your Metrica, your mountains and stuff, I think Daughters probably deal with them quite well, just on volume of attacks because they haven't got any rend anyway, and they just chuck loads of attacks at you.
All those really obnoxious, is it pole axes from their Berserkers with the mortal wounds on 6, 2 mortals on 6s? Awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
So does Deepkin not give them a real run with just the mobility, the speed, the hard hitting impact?
They do, but it's if you can get to Teclis.
Yeah.
But I did it in testing. I had a game where I wiped them out in a turn because I can get to Teclis. But then I've had games where you can't get to him with different builds, and then the magic all of a sudden becomes a real thing because you got no magic defense.
Sure.
So they just start mortaring your eels.
Yeah, there's a lot of mortal wounds.
Yeah, and something like we talked about as well with the rune. If the rune went down, you've got no way to stop that, and that's just going to keep hitting your eels. There's not a lot you can do. But if you can get to Teclis, obviously, you can destroy them.
Okay. And what about OBR? How do they fit in with all of this?
Teclis doesn't want to see any crawlers. I'll tell you that right now.
Why is that? Just because of the amount of damage they do normal shooting at him?
Yeah, you just got to play the 4-up game, haven't you? And then the 5-up. But when he degrades, like Paul says earlier, he doesn't heal. So even if 2 crawler wounds, if you take 10 wounds off in turn 1, it is a big deal.
Yeah, just chip away.
And they can shoot in turn 1, can't they? They're one of the few armies that can actually get to in turn 1 with little effort.
Okay.
For me, I think the Warclans book, I certainly think the Bone Splitters offer some potential issues. A number of the armies you can get low drops, and we've already talked about the weakness of Teclis before you get your turn. They've got ranged attacks, they've got mass bodies, and they've got speed. I think they're already seeing the Warclans book relatively competitive at the moment, more heavily on the Ironjaw side and the mix for the Big War. I think the Bone Splitters itself is actually something that's relatively untapped, I think, since the book's come out, because the other stuff's been seen, but that's got a bit of everything, but what it does have is the speed and the fly to actually reach.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's why I have Lenore in the list near the Shining Company spears, because the minus one on him and -2 on them means you're fairly resilient to a melee alpha, because it's really hard. It just negates so much damage, especially if you've got Teclis's protection up, and then you need to basically, it almost is a bit like a really old undead army. You want to suck people in because they think they look fragile. You know, it looks like an elf with a spear. People think, oh, that's just going to fall over. With all the things you can stack up on it, you can actually be really tough. People come in, get stuck, and you just smash them off. The issue, though, is the mobility. To play that, you have to play quite tight. You don't have a lot of spare points. You haven't got, for example, old eagles. You know, you would have had, in high elf days, you would have a couple of eagles in that list, and they would have flown off and grabbed your objectives. Because you haven't got something like that. That's what I think the challenge is going to be, is actually the movement of it. If you want to play that really cool bubble, you don't have a lot left to go and grab objectives. So you're almost trying to suck your opponent into you, wipe them out, and then win the game in turns 3, 4, and 5, because you're probably not going to score that much in turns 1 and 2.
It does feel a bit like if someone just comes and sits on you and bogs you down in your half of the table, you can really struggle to come back from that.
Yeah.
Gits.
I mostly think
Gits is a
Skaven.
good call, I think.
The Skaven have been quieter, haven't they?
Skaven, you think, will do it?
Well, I think Skaven have got the bodies you talked about to hold you up for a turn or two, and they're surplus to requirements. The clan rats and the units like that. You've got the gutter runners with a free move, but also the scryer side of the Skaven book. I think you can get
Storm
dropped
Fiends.
armies.
Yeah, Storm Fiends
yeah.
will remove Teclis.
Cannons.
They're going to see Teclis.
It's the range, though, isn't it? Storm Fiends.
You've got Gnarholes, haven't you?
You could Gnarholes, Bridge.
You're going to be mid-board.
Yeah, and even like you don't see them that much, but warp fire throwers, any of that is going to remove the wardens and the
Prescribe battalion, Ben, that you've got in a box somewhere at home. Pull that back out.
Just that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, might be right.
Yeah, Gisele's. It's that mixed book that can do everything. Certainly will offer it some interesting challenges.
So my next list is actually a shooting list. I'm inspired by playing against Byron at it wasn't Facehammer, was it? It was Eggs. So he had a really nice Tempest Eye list with a load of shooting. He had a bridge and a big unit of Iron Drakes, is it? Didn't like that aspect of it. Didn't like the all your eggs on your bridge and with a load of guns. So take that 400 odd points, 500 points, and just put more MSU shooting in. So that's my next list. So hopefully it'll be able to hold up against the magic barrage I'll get and put some shooting back.
What happened to your shootcast list?
I just don't think it does anything after it comes down. I think it's a one-turn wonder, and that's the one. So I've kind of tweaked it to a Tempest Eye list. So using Javelin prosecutors still.
Yeah.
So getting some of them back out and a bit of everything really. No Lumineth in there though. It would be quite nice to have some of them Sentinels in the cities list, but alas, not to be. But I do like the idea of these guys. There's some photos, some artwork that's been put up, and it just looks like an old Dark Elf army with the purples and golds and silvers and things, and you know it's got some of them emotions flowing for me. So maybe it might be, and in the future I might pick these up. We'll see. So I think that about wraps things up. I think we've covered pretty much everything we wanted to cover. Is there anything else you guys think we might have missed?
It's
quite a
hard
good
to
rundown.
much detail, isn't it? But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading the lore in the book as well. You know, with the artwork. Because we don't get to see it, do we? So I'm really looking forward to that because the book looks amazing from what the community showed.
Yeah, it does. And this is why we haven't really covered it on this episode, because we're getting that at the same time as everyone else. We don't. It's really interesting from a playtesting point of view. It's like we get a PDF, and like often the first question is like, what do the models look like? What do they feel like on the table? How big are the bases and the mod? Because that makes a big difference, doesn't it? In just like
base size, massive.
Yeah. So you look at the rules and you think how they might play, and then when you see the model as well, it's like, oh right, okay, really interested. So let's wrap things up. But before we do, I did put a shout out on Twitter just to see if people have got any questions for us while we're getting all on. I didn't actually do one for the Seraphon review because I didn't know, announcing we're going to be doing a review before the book was even out, and I didn't know how it'd go. So we'll just have a rundown and see if there's anything on Twitter we've not covered. The first one, Dave Fraser's asked, do you think they've got the mechanics like the 2-inch movement, the formation adds to the enjoyment of the game, or is it just another time factor, like having the two models touching? I think he means. So what's it called? The Shining
Company.
Yeah. How do you think that impacts the game? Like once it's on the table and playing. No big deal. Does it make it faster, slower?
Didn't slow it down for me when I was playing it.
I think it adds to the theme. It makes you play in a phalanx, which is how they're meant to play.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. There's a question here from Karadim. How does this handle, and we've talked about this a bit, and it is a weakness of the list, I think. How do you handle something that's really fast, teleporty, shooty? Do you just die, or do you have some defense against things like the salamanders just popping up and having free reign with the shooting, the flamers doing the similar? You haven't got real good screens. You can't stay off the board and come back on later. How do you deal with that sort of thing?
I think you have to build to go first. If that's the meta, you have to build to go first.
You got the minuses as well, haven't you?
You have got minuses, but I think building to go first to get up your defensive buffs on Teclis and on the army makes a big difference.
I think things like salamanders have got quite a short range, so they're not so much of an issue because you can use one of your units to, in effect, push them back from the stuff you don't want them to hit. It's the longer range things like the KO maybe where you've got more issues.
Okay.
Well, KO can just pounce, can't they? Because they have to fly high. They just wait. They don't have to do it turn one.
No.
They're like, are you going to move mid-board or not? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, okay.
I think they're a very specific case, aren't they? And they're quite a strong counter for the Realm-Lords. Well, the Teclis build, at least.
Yeah.
Okay. War Chief Baz, and you've all got to answer this, and none of you can choose Teclis. It says, what's your favourite unit in the book? So, Brian?
Sentinels.
Jim?
Avalor.
Chippy?
Stone Guard.
Paul?
I've already said the Dawn Riders.
Dawn Riders. You know what? I think that unit of 10 Dawn Riders in a list with Teclis, I think that will be really fun to use. So many options there. So, yeah, I like that one. Luke Morton says, what's your top 3 tomes at the moment in power level, and where do you think this book stands at the moment? Is it going to be in the top 3, basically? So just a quick go round. Top 3, yes or no?
No.
No?
For me, I'm going to say no as well, but it's not because it's not got the capabilities. It's just not got something that's auto pull out. It's one of those books that will be a top 3 with a good player's hands who's played with it quite a bit. You need to invest your time with it, and it's often the case with Elven armies anyway.
I like the fact that you said it hasn't got anything that's auto. Literally, they've got the only thing that is auto.
I don't think so.
Literally auto cast. But yeah, cool. Okay, so Jim and Brian, no, yes, no, top 3.
I'm similar to Ricky really in that it's not a top 3 tome. I don't think in terms of power level because I think Luke's a match play focused player as much as he has a very narrative themed looking army. But it's I think so. I assume he's talking about match play, but I don't think it'll be top 3. I think it'll be like Ricky said. If someone's really good with the army and they play smart like an elf, if you will, they'll have success. I don't think it's just a put down and run into the army and win sort of style.
Okay,
I think it can go top 3, win tournaments, but you've got to have played a lot with it and you've got to understand it. So
you've got to really know how your army plays those scenarios, don't you?
Yeah.
You've got to have played focal points before against doors, and know how you can play that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a few other ones in here. So someone's mentioned something about the gods. So we've got quite a few gods in Age of Sigmar now, haven't we? Where do you think Tyrion stacks up in relation, in coolness, in power? We've got Nagash.
Teclis.
Yeah, Teclis. Sorry, that's the one. I'm reading Twitter at the same time. I'm reading Twitter at the same time as talking. Where does Teclis? I'm saying it again. Where does Teclis stack up in terms of like Alariel, Marathi, the Elven ones in particular? What about a mixed order list with them all in?
They all do different things. I don't know if you can cross compare them like that.
But
I'd say
yes, we're going to.
Yeah, I'd say it's similar but different to Marathi and better than Alariel.
I'd say he's number 2 to Gotrek.
I see.
Yeah, I get that.
I think below Nagash and Archaon, above Alariel.
Okay. Marathi's
just too easy to kill. He's just too easy to kill.
You think? Yeah, is that the issue?
Yeah.
So you're saying this, but you get a 4-up save. You can be ethereal. You can have a 5+ ignore, and you can also get minuses to hit. There's not many things that are going to be more defensive than that. No.
If you've had your turn.
If you go first, and
Okay.
that's massive.
Okay. So there's a chance that you just die, basically.
Most of the things that can alpha strike and kill him are stuff that are in 1-drop or 2-drop lists.
So do you think this book will lean... Jim, you talked about your list was a 2-drop. Do you think that's
Yeah, again, that's for match play purposes. Because, KO shooting Teclis is a problem. They're usually around 2-3 drop if they take the battalion. Drops matter because I really have to go first.
Okay.
I'd like to. Something like a change host would go before me. Flames would still be super scary. But I like to go first and get the buffs up because although Teclis does have debuffs, he does put a 4-up. Rend is a thing in the game, and I think anything that comes after Teclis is going to have Rend, and he melts very fast. And he has to be mid-board with the army for his 18 Endura. It's not like he can just be at the back and still buff mid-board. So he does have to be in and around the action.
Yeah, I get that.
Which is a trade-off. So he is going to take some damage.
It is interesting that he is... he's got some ways of reaching out, but a lot of it's just short range, isn't it, with Teclis? Yeah,
his shooting attack is great. But it's the aura that you had before, and the more damage you take, it shrinks.
Yeah, that aura does go down really quick as he starts taking wounds.
So that's a problem.
Okay, well, I think that covers everything. There's been loads of questions. Thanks to anyone who messaged today and on the Facebook page and our Twitter account. A lot of the questions that have come in, if I've not given you a shout out, is because we've probably already covered them. Well then, guys, I think that wraps everything up. Thanks so much to you chaps for joining me tonight. If anyone has got any questions for the guys directly, you can leave a comment on Twitter on the thread to this episode, or on the Facebook page for us, and I can pass it on. Or all the guys have got Twitter accounts. It's probably the place they hang out the most online, I guess. So Brian is at UberTechie. James is just James_Tinsdale.
At James_Tinsdale, yeah.
Brilliant.
I change that.
Is at Chippy Rick.
Yeah, Chippy_Rick.
And at Warhammer GC for Paul. So thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks to everyone out there for listening. And we'll see you all on the next episode, whatever the next release may be. We'll get another group of playtesters in to have a chat about that. And hopefully it won't be too long. We didn't really talk about lockdown in this one. And I think it's a refreshing change because every podcast I've listened to for the last few months, all they've done all the way through is talk about lockdown. So in all the craziness of playtesting, new books and all of that, it's also the roller coaster of COVID-19 at the same time as it all, I guess. So hopefully by the time the next episode comes out, we'll be back at tournaments and things like that. That'll be good, won't it? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
cheers,
Look
guys.
forward to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Cheers, man.
Cheers,
See you all
Ben.
later. Bye.